Hey, good afternoon, World History. This is Unit 7.4, and today we're looking at the results of imperialism and how the war to end all wars basically begins, and it does have a lot to do with this imperialism attitude of these big countries wanting to go after these smaller countries. And so we're going to look today at basically asking, how did we get to this particular point in roughly 1914? So it's important to understand that there are four main causes of World War I. It's easy to remember by understanding this: M.A.I.N, M-A-I-N. There are four main causes of World War I. The first one is militarism. And militarism is this process of building up military strength for the purpose of intimidating other countries. There's your imperialism. I'm going to build up my military to make you feel threatened. Go back and think about what the United States kind of did to Japan with Matthew Perry and causing Japan to open up its ports. It's this feeling that if my military is powerful, I'm going to be able to overtake you. Well, if your neighbor, if you think about this, and here's France, and let's say that France is building up their military, then if you're part of Austria-Hungary or Germany, and you know that France is building up their military, what are you going to do? You're going to build up your military as well. So you start seeing all of these countries start building up their military, and that's just going to lead to a war that is about to happen. And the other thing that we see here is the A part, and that's alliances. And these are agreements that are made among nations to aid each other if attacked. For instance, England basically goes and says, hey, France, if we get attacked, do you have our back? Are you going to help us? And France says, yes, as long as you'll help us if we get attacked. So you start to see these individuals start to develop these relationships. The problem is that many of these alliances are not just confusing, but they're also secret. For instance, you have Germany, that if you look at the Central Power, in 1882, it had an alliance with Austria, but also Italy. Well, if you think through this, Italy will establish a relationship or an alliance with France. So if Germany and France go to war, then Italy has technically made an alliance with Germany and with France. So who are they going to support? So this is going to lead to what's going to be known as the Allied powers, or the other side, which is known as the Central powers. The Central powers consisting of Germany, Austria, and the Turkish Empire, or what we call today as the Ottomans. Whereas the Allies is going to focus on Great Britain, France, and Russia. So militarism, alliances, and then the third main cause of World War I is what we've already talked about: imperialism. And as we start to see this idea of imperialism, where fierce competition to control a particular land or good or process, whatever it might be, we start seeing this take place in our particular society. And then finally, we have nationalism. Nationalism and imperialism go hand in hand, because nationalism is you have extreme pride in your country, and you have a feeling of superiority towards your country, which is going to cause you to want to become more interested in your own interest than in maintaining a peace that has pretty much been holding true in Europe for close to 100 years. So you've got militarism, secret, confusing alliances, imperialism, and nationalism all kind of coming together, and all now that you need is this powder keg explosion that is just going to set the world on fire, if you will. And that powder keg is going to happen very, very quickly. So the five great powers of Europe at this time: you have Germany, which is being controlled by Kaiser Wilhelm; Austria-Hungary with Franz Joseph; you have Great Britain, David Lloyd Carr; Russia is Tsar Nicholas II, and then France, of course, George Clemenceau. Now, all of these are fascinating individuals, but none of them are really the powder keg that starts World War I. That is actually going to come as we look at this individual who was known as Franz Ferdinand. He is the Archduke of Austria. And it's a powerful, interesting story, if you will. And so, Franz Ferdinand, born in 1863, he is the nephew of the current Austrian emperor, and the current Austrian emperor is Franz Joseph, and Franz Ferdinand is the heir to the throne of Austria. Well, he is told by his uncle that, hey, you're going to be the Emperor of Austria when I die. And so Franz Ferdinand says, thank you, that's awesome. I'm really excited about that, until he meets Sophie. And Sophie, who is, you can see in this picture right here, when he meets Sophie, he falls in love with her. And there's this beautiful love story that begins with Franz Ferdinand and with Sophie. It's powerful. But the problem is that Sophie is lower class. She is not in his league, if you will, according to the emperor and to Franz's family. So this ultimatum is given to Franz Ferdinand. And it's very simply this: if you marry her, you lose the emperor. You can't become leader. If you don't marry her, you can become emperor. So he has this choice that he has to make, and his choice is he chooses love over power. And so he decides that he's going to marry Sophie, and he knows that he's going to give up his rights to the throne. Well, what happens is Uncle is pretty upset with him and decides to send him on an official state visit to a place that's known as Sarajevo, and that's in the Austrian-held province of Bosnia. So he will go to the Serbian place known as Bosnia, and he's going to greet people. He's going to talk to them. He's going to, just welcome them. I mean, he's a member of the royal family, so this is pretty exciting, unless you're not a big fan of the Austrian royalty, if you will. Well, that introduces us to an individual who's known as Gavrilo Princip, and that's a name you need to remember. Probably known as history's greatest teenage troublemaker. 19 years of age when pretty much his name becomes commonplace with world history. Well, he was part of a group of individuals known as the Black Hand, and they were Serbian nationalists. And they did not like the Austrians controlling them. Here's that imperialistic attitude. They don't like Austria trying to control them. They're nationalists. They have a very, very powerful view of their country, and they don't think they need to be ruled by anybody else. And so these 6 individuals decide, we're going to do something about this. We're going to show that imperialism is not going to happen in Serbia. And so they find out that Archduke Franz Ferdinand is coming to visit Sarajevo. So they decide that they were going to assassinate Franz Ferdinand. So what happens is they know where the motorcade is going to be, where the pass, and you've got these 6 individuals who are basically lined up down the path. And the first guy has a grenade. And when Franz Ferdinand's motorcade comes by, he takes the grenade, he throws it, and it hits Franz Ferdinand's motorcade, his car, if you will, and it rolls off, and it doesn't explode. It misses. And it rolls off, and it actually explodes and hits another area, causing other people to be injured. But Franz Ferdinand, he escapes injured. So Ferdinand's convoy carries on, and the other assassins are like, oh my gosh, can't believe this has happened. It failed. And so they decide they're not going to do anything. They fail to act. They leave it alone. Well, about an hour later, Franz Ferdinand, he decides he wants to go to the hospital. And as he goes to the hospital, and the reason he's going to the hospital is because he wants to check on those people that were injured in the blast, the blast that was designed to kill him. So he goes to the hospital to meet those individuals, and as he is returning from his visit at the Sarajevo hospital, the convoy takes a wrong turn, and that's the thing. It is completely just a wrong turn. And as the driver of the car is going down this road, because he's made a bad error in judgment and just took the wrong road, they come across Princip, one of the guys who was supposed to assassinate Franz Ferdinand, but didn't do it because of the chaos that was going. And now, by sheer circumstance, by nothing that is planned, you have Princip, who is face to face with Ferdinand in his motorcade. And so Princip finds his target a sitting duck right in front of him. He fires one shot with a pistol. By fluke, it cuts Franz Ferdinand's jugular vein in his neck. He's dead in a matter of minutes, along with Sophie, his wife. And that right there is the beginning of World War I, the powder keg that starts it. I do think it is interesting that Princip, he is charged. A lot of things go on with this. They decide who's to blame. Well, Austria-Hungary blames Serbia because they say, look, your dude, Gavio Princip, he killed our person. And so they issue an ultimatum to Serbia and say, you've got to stop this, and whoever was involved in the plot, you've got to take care of them. Well, Serbia refuses to comply, and they actually say, hey, sorry about that, but we really don't know who killed Franz Ferdinand. We just don't know. We're sorry about that. And we're just not going to meet your demands. So Austria-Hungary gets greedy and declares war on Serbia on July 28, 1914. Well, Russia, a friend of Serbia, says, no, we have an alliance with Serbia. Austria-Hungary can't declare war on Serbia. So Russia says, if you do this and you declare war on Serbia, then we're going to declare war on you. So Russia gets involved. Well, then Germany, who is an ally of Austria, says, Russia, you can't join in on this. This is not your deal. You don't need to be involved in it. But now that you've gotten involved in it, we're going to get involved in it, and we're going to support our alliance with Austria. Germany then begins to invade Belgium, and that causes England, who has an alliance with Belgium, to become involved. And next thing you know, you see France getting involved, and World War I has now begun. It is known as the Great War, not known as World War I at this time, because we didn't plan on there being a World War II. This was the only war that we hoped would ever take place. It was going to be the war to end all wars. It was known as the Great War, but as you know, it will not be the only war. And you can see that because of this, our world will be engaged in a very deadly battle. I do want to share with you something before we go about Princip. So Austria-Hungary believed that the death sentence should be appropriate for the person that killed Franz Ferdinand. Well, the Serbians, they do arrest Princip, and they sentence him to 20 years in prison. They don't give him the death penalty. And the reason they don't give him the death penalty is because, very simply, the law stated that at this particular time, if you were under the age of 20, you could not be executed for any crime. You had to be over 20. Princip was 19, therefore he gets 20 years in prison, and he will actually die only serving 4 years because he dies of tuberculosis while he's in prison. That's the story of how World War I begins.